Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Mayo Clinic and National Kidney Foundation of Florida Big Ask Big Give webinar. We'll give it a few more minutes, maybe just a couple. I know we're right at 4 o'clock, and see if we get a couple people more to join, and then we'll get right started with the webinar. All right, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Savannah Lanza, and I'm the CEO for the National Kidney Foundation of Florida. I'm very excited to partner again with the wonderful Mayo Clinic transplant team in Jacksonville, Florida. We've been doing this for, I want to say, 4 years now and they're just incredible supporters of this program and of all the things that we do in Florida and Jacksonville specifically with our kidney walk, and we just are thrilled to partner with you all again. So welcome to the National Kidney Foundation's Finding a Living Donor webinar. We're super excited that we had so many people register. We're hoping more will join us as we go through these very important and useful slides. We've got some wonderful speakers, patients that have joined us as well, who will be sharing their story. And really the purpose of this program is to provide helpful and meaningful education about living donation and transplant, and to really just shed light on the positive aspects and how incredible a transplant from a living donor really is for the outcomes of our patients. I did send out an email earlier today with information from the National Kidney Foundation regarding our resources, as well as resources from Mayo Clinic. So you should have all received that in your emails that you registered with. If not, just let me know, or we will send out a follow-up email after the presentation with a recording and a copy of the slides. So just a couple of housekeeping and technical support notes before we get started. If you need to leave for any reason, or if you get disconnected, you can come back and join us. Just use the same link to log back into this webinar. All audience members are muted, but you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions. And also you can see questions other people have asked. If you have the same question, you can click the thumbs up icon below the question. That way we know it's an important one to get to. We also want to use the chat box to comment and participate throughout the program. If you can find the chat box at the bottom of your screen, go ahead and type in where you're tuning in from. And just a little blurb about the National Kidney Foundation. The mission and everything that we do really is on behalf of our patients that we serve. We are a statewide organization here in Florida, but we span obviously throughout the entire country with the other divisions and affiliates that cover those areas. So if you're not joining from Florida, You certainly can reach out to your local offices, and there's plenty of resources for you in those areas as well. And if you are joining us from Florida, which I assume a majority of you are, please get involved with us. We do events all over the state and have many programs for our dialysis program patients, which we'll talk about at the end of the webinar. Again, thank you to Mayo. You guys are incredible, and we love partnering with you on this program every year. So we'll go over all the important aspects of kidney transplantation. And as we know, there's an urgent need for kidneys, and the waiting list for transplant is very long. You probably already know that there are two treatments for kidney failure, dialysis and transplant. Kidney transplant offers more freedom and a better quality of life than dialysis. And in general, living donation is really the best option for patients who have kidney failure. But kidney patients, family members, and friends often don't know enough about living donation. Even when you do, you may be shy about asking someone to consider living donation. You may not know who to ask. You may not even want to ask. Just by sharing your story, though, there's a chance that a living donor will come forward. You may not be able to imagine how to start that conversation. However, there are lots of resources that can help. And these strategies that we talk about today can be used by kidney patients along with their family members and friends who want to spread the word about the need. Family and friends will also learn how to be effective advocates for the kidney patients. So this is really a tool for just having the confidence to get out there and really share your story and make that initial first step towards transplant. Today, we'll be covering 7 different topics to help you along your journey towards finding a living donor. First up are busting the myths and making sure you know all the facts about having a living donor transplant. And next, we'll cover how to write and share your story, as well as have advocates or friends and family help you share your story so that more people might hear about your need for a kidney. And lastly, you'll be able to find your own action plan and hear about helpful resources to guide you towards having a living donor come forward. You'll also have a chance to answer interactive polling questions throughout the program by responding to poll questions that will pop up on your screen. And this program can truly help you find a kidney donor. This is Jeff, who found a kidney donor after using the tools in this program. And he was very thankful for the education, preparation, and support in aiding him to communicate his story and find a donor. So please come out of this with these tools and go out into the real world. And we hope that everyone is successful in their journey. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Attia with Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, and she's going to go over the first section of the agenda, busting myths and knowing the facts.
Thank you, Savannah. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so let's start by defining what is living donation. So living donation is exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone who is a healthy person with healthy kidney function decides to be a donor for someone who is on dialysis or has kidney disease. And that donor really can be anyone. We all hear about parents wanting to donate to their children, or even children wanting to donate to their parents, or even a donation between siblings or between a spouse or their partner. But really, a donor can be anyone, can be a friend, an acquaintance, and a donor can even be a complete stranger. So we call those non-directed donors, where the donor who is a healthy person decides that they want to donate, sometimes anonymously, to a complete stranger who's on the wait list. Now, something that's very important to know, and now we have a lot of research, we know that a living kidney donor can really go on to live a very healthy life with just one kidney. We know that living donors have the same quality of life compared to the general population. And we know that their life expectancy is the same compared to the general population. So now all the research shows that living donation is safe and donors can really have good outcomes. A question that is almost that we always get is who's going to cover the cost of donation? Who's going to cover the cost of the workup or the cost of the surgery? So the medical costs for the donors are typically covered by the recipient's insurance. And sometimes if there's any complications after the transplant, that is also covered by the recipient's insurance, or it can be also covered by the transplant center. Now, every transplant center is different, but usually it's through the recipient's insurance. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, now what is the first step? So how do we start all of this? So if you are the recipient with kidney failure, the first step is for you to get connected to a transplant center. So if you have a living donor or you're thinking about a living donor, the first step, it's the same thing. You have to get connected with a transplant center and you have to undergo evaluation. It's the same exact evaluation if you are searching for a living donor or if you're waiting for a deceased donor. So there's a checklist of tests that we have to do. And once all those tests are completed, and if the transplant centers finds that they are all satisfactory, then the next step will be to get on the wait list. So even patients who are waiting for a living donor transplant have to be waitlisted. Okay, now before we move to the next section, I just want to hear from you. I have a few questions. The first question, did you know that a living donor doesn't need to be directly related to the kidney patient to donate? And the second question, did you know that to get a kidney from a living donor, you need to be evaluated by the transplant center, just like for deceased donor kidneys? Great, okay, very good. Okay, so let's move to the next section. Okay, now it's really good that we understand what living donation is about, but it's also good to know all the facts so that when you're communicating with your potential donor, you know you have all the information and all the knowledge to give them so that they can be making an informed decision. So we're going to talk about strategies to find, but we're going to be talking about busting the myth first and trying to know some facts. Now, a few basic reminders first. As we all know, once someone has kidney failure, then there's really two options, two treatment options for them. The first option is dialysis, and that can be peritoneal dialysis, in-center hemodialysis, or even home hemodialysis. And the second option is transplant, and transplant can be from either a deceased donor or a living donor. Usually we know that transplant is the preferred option because that's going to be associated with a better quality of life, and that's also going to have a survival advantage compared to staying on dialysis. But we know that kidney disease is hard, and let's face it, it can really have a huge emotional burden on recipients and their caregivers. So it's very common for patients living with kidney disease to have depression or anxiety. And research shows that up to 24% of patients with chronic kidney disease have depression, and even 35% of patients who are on dialysis have been also diagnosed with depression. So that's where the transplant social workers come in and where they are trained to work with you through all this difficult period just to have the best chances of being approved and getting on the transplant waitlist. Okay, let's do some questions now. We'll try to make it fun. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and I want you to respond by true or false. Okay, let's start with the first question. Okay, the first question is, kidneys from living donors typically last longer than from deceased donors. Do you think that's true or false? And the second question is, you can get a kidney transplant before you have to start dialysis. Is that true or false? Okay, amazing. Okay, So let's talk about some facts. Okay, now, first, both kinds of transplants, if living donor and deceased donors, are associated with better health outcomes compared to staying on dialysis. So both of them are really good options, but there are some benefits to living kidney donation compared to waiting for a deceased donor. So the first question that we get is, how long is my kidney gonna last? And there is no one answer for everyone, but usually what we tell patients is that if you're getting a kidney from a deceased donor, we expect that kidney to last about 7 to 10 years on average, whereas if you're getting a kidney from a living donor, that kidney can last much longer, and it can last 15 to 20 years on average. The next important thing to know about living kidney donation is that there is really no wait time. So if you're on the deceased donor wait list, we typically have to wait for your name to get to the top of the list. And that's usually several years before we get to the transplant stage. Whereas if we have a living donor, then there's really no need for all that wait. We can schedule the surgery whenever is convenient for the recipient and for the donor, so that there's really no wait time. And most of the times, if recipients are waitlisted early, we're even able to skip dialysis altogether. So patients don't have to wait until their kidney function is low enough that they need dialysis. They can get a transplant preemptively before they are sick for dialysis. So that's a great advantage of having a living donor. Now, also, if we have a living donor, that means that fewer patients will be waiting on the deceased donor wait list. So there's going to be more opportunities for other people to get transplanted as well. And a very important thing to mention is that living donor kidneys tend to work quicker. So we know that when someone has a transplant from a deceased donor, sometimes those kidneys are a bit sleepy because they've spent some time on ice. So the recipient may require dialysis for a couple of weeks after transplant. Whereas if we're getting a kidney from a living donor, we know that that kidney is going to start working right away. Most of our patients never require any dialysis after transplant. Okay, let's do some more true or false questions. Okay, so these questions, okay. The first question is, a kidney donor is usually in pain for about 3 to 4 months after surgery. Is that true or false? And the second question is, a kidney donor will usually be in the hospital for about 1 to 2 nights after surgery. What do you think? Okay. I see that 18% answered that the kidney donor is in pain for 3 to 4 months after surgery, which is false. And I see most of you got it right with the second question. So 90% answered that the kidney donor will be in the hospital for about 1 to 2 nights. So that's good. Okay. Now with all the progress with the surgical techniques, most of the donors are actually getting their surgeries laparoscopically. So the incisions are very, very small, and that usually means that our donors usually have much faster recovery and they have less pain. So we usually tell donors that, yes, you're going to have some pain for the first couple of weeks, and that will require some pain medications to manage it. But the pain should really start getting better after the first 2 to 3 weeks. The pain is usually due to bloating, due to the surgical incision, but it does get better quickly. And the hospital stay is 1 to 2 nights on average, even 1 night, and then the donor is discharged the next day. Of course, there's some follow-up after the donor is discharged. But usually most of our donors feel really good and have achieved a complete recovery by 4 to 6 weeks. Now, there are some risks, of course, associated to living kidney donation, just like with any surgery, right? So there's a risk of bleeds, there's a risk of infection, there's a risk of blood clots during the surgery. So all of those risks can happen, but they are very minimal. Okay, so before we move on to the next question, did you know that living donor kidneys typically last longer than deceased donor kidneys? Okay, amazing. Most are answering yes, so that's really good. Okay, let's move on to the next questions. 98% answered yes. Okay, now a few true or false questions, and these times they're about the long-term effects of donation on the donor. Okay, and I have 4 questions this time. So the first question is it true or false that a kidney donor will have to change their diet after donation? The second question is, a kidney donor can no longer play sports or exercise after donation. Is that true or false? The third question is, a kidney donor cannot drink alcohol after donation. And the fourth question is, a female kidney donor can get pregnant after donation. So are these statements true or false? Let's see what you think. Okay, so 24% said that a kidney donor will have to change their diet after donation, which is not particularly true. So kidney donors really can go on to live very long and healthy lives after donation. They don't really to make any adjustments long term. Of course, they do have to continue following a healthy diet, but there are no specific dietary restrictions. We counsel all our donors on having a healthy lifestyle, following a healthy diet, but there's no specific dietary restrictions. Now, for question 2, a kidney donor can no longer play sports or exercise. Well, 98% got that question correct. So that is of course false. Kidney donors can usually resume normal physical activity by 4 to 6 weeks after donation. Usually we advise people to kind of take it slow, but they can resume all physical activity. So there's no restrictions. For the third question, a kidney donor can't drink alcohol after donation. That is also false. So a lot of alcohol is, of course, not advisable for anyone, regardless of kidney donation, but there is a risk of dehydration with too much alcohol. So we ask our kidney donors to drink alcohol in moderation, but they can still drink. And with regards to donation after to pregnancy after kidney donation, that is that donors can actually get pregnant after donation. So they can. So you see that really our living donors can go on to have a very good quality of life after donating with no restrictions for the most part. Now that's because also during their evaluation, they are undergoing a lot of tests to make sure that they are healthy enough and that they are fit for donation. After donation, we do provide follow-up care. So usually our donors are followed up at the 6 month, the 1 year, and the 2-year mark after donation to make sure that they continue to do well. And those medical expenses are also paid by the recipient's insurance. Okay, so let's move on to the last set of true or false questions. Okay, and these are very common questions that we get asked all the time. So the first question, a kidney donor cannot be older than 60. Is that true or false? The second question, a kidney donor must be about the same age as the recipient. And the third question is, a kidney donor does not need to be the same blood type as the recipient. What do you guys think? Okay, so let's go through the questions one by one. We can advance the slide. Okay, so with regards to the age limit, and that is a common question. So there is no upper age limit. We know that a donor has to be at least 18 years of age to be able to donate, but there's really no upper limit. Every center is a bit different. It really depends on how healthy the donor is. So it depends more on their physiological age, and it depends on if they have any specific comorbidities or any contraindications, but there is really no upper limit. We have even accepted donors who are 70 and above, and they have been doing really well. So there's no upper limit for age. Now, again, there is a very thorough evaluation process to make sure that these candidates are suitable donor regardless of their age. The donor and the recipient definitely do not need to be of the same age. We know that parents can donate to their children, children can donate to their kids. And also with regards to the blood type, the donor and the recipient do not have to be specifically the same blood type. So we know, for example, that if you are a potential donor and you are blood type A, you can donate to someone who is blood type AB. So the blood type does not have to be exactly the same. Now, there are some rules which we can also share. Now, a very important message that I have is that don't make any assumptions. Don't assume that this certain person who is interested in being a donor is good or is not good. Allow your transplant center really to decide and to be the judge to determine if this donor is eligible or not. Okay, now, what is the first step? So what should we do when we find a potential living donor? So the first step would be, after you begin your transplant evaluation, that would be for the living donor to reach out to the transplant center and to start the process. So you cannot reach out as the recipient, you cannot reach out to the transplant center on behalf of the donor. The donor has to reach out to the transplant center to begin their evaluation. Okay. And my last question is, did you know living donors have the same life expectancy as people who are not donors? Okay, great. 86% said yes. Amazing. Okay, so now I will hand it over to Turan, our living donor coordinator, to continue.
Thank you, Dr. Attia. Hi, everyone. My name's Turan. I am one of the living donor coordinators here on the kidney transplant team. And I'm going to start off first talking a little bit about paired exchange. Now that we've busted some myths and got to know some facts, let's talk about some of the options as you're navigating trying to find your living donor. Now, in some cases, a donor and a recipient may not even necessarily need to be a direct match. The donor is wanting to donate to an individual, may not necessarily have to be a direct match to that individual. If the donor is found not to be a good match for whatever reason, there are a lot of variables that go into considering quote unquote matchability. They can exchange kidneys with another donor and recipient pair to make a better match. So let's say, for example, that you want to donate to your daughter or your husband or your wife or your child, but maybe for whatever reason we said because of blood type, antibodies, age difference, size, any of the factors that we consider for matchability, we've determined that maybe you're not the best match for direct donation. So we can try and find another pair who also wants to donate to their loved one, but maybe they are also not a direct match. So you might be a good match for each other's recipient. So in this case, donor one may be a great match for recipient number two, and donor two may be a great match for recipient one. And essentially, we can arrange for a four-way exchange here. And that's kind of what paired exchange is. The ability to enter into a paired exchange program, whether it's internally at one center or through our partnership with the National Kidney Registry, allows for a donor who may not be able to donate directly to an intended recipient, still gives them a chance for that recipient to receive a transplant from a living donor. This is really important to remember when talking about paired exchange, for the recipients to know that in exchange for their intended donor donating to another individual, in exchange for that, they're getting a living kidney, because we've talked about some of the benefits from living donation, and you just want to be sure that you're getting in exchange for what that person is giving. So with that being said, it's always really, really important to remember, no matter the difference in age, blood type, size, whatever the case may be, for somebody who may express interest in wanting to potentially be considered as a donor for you, that you encourage them to go ahead and submit an application and apply, because there are still a number of ways that they may be able to help you receive a transplant. Next slide. So paired exchange, like I said, is done mostly from us through our partnership with the National Kidney Registry. They're a national organization that partners with centers all over the country. When I checked yesterday, I think the count was like 103 different transplant centers all over the nation. And then there are also some centers that have, their own internal paired exchange programs. But most of what we do for paired exchange is done through our partnership with the National Kidney Registry, and that is that large network of transplant centers all over the country. So if a living donor, just to expand a bit more on the whole paired exchange program, if a living donor is unable to donate to their chosen recipient because they aren't compatible, the center will discuss the option with that donor once they are approved to donate on entering into a paired exchange program through the National Kidney Registry. We enter for that donor all of the data from their evaluation, all their testing results, the blood typing, the diagnostic testing, compatibility information, et cetera, into the registry. And then depending on blood type and some other factors for both donor and recipient in the format in which they intend to donate, there's going to be some waiting time. They could get matched pretty quickly. A lot of folks do get matched very quickly when they're entered. And again, the things that drive that are blood type and sensitivity level for both donor and recipient. And there are, in some cases, where that wait time can be a little bit longer and go past a few months. But typically speaking, about 80% of the incompatible pairs that we enter into the National Kidney Registry, they get matched within 90 days. Oftentimes, a donor will donate on the same day as their intended recipient receives their kidney from their matched living donor. But sometimes that's not always the best scenario. Sometimes that just doesn't work for people, and it forces the donor and the recipient maybe be a little bit more available and flexible with their schedules, or maybe there's concerns regarding caregivers. For all the recipients here, I'm sure you know how crucial it is to have a good caregiver throughout your recovery process. So the National Kidney Registry does have a program that they've created, and it's like a voucher system where the donor is allowed to donate in advance, and they create like a voucher or an IOU or a coupon, however you want to think about it, for the intended recipient. And then once that voucher is created, immediately following the donor's donation, we go and activate the voucher for the recipient and start working to find their match. And again, like I said, for spouses, I hear a lot of the time them say, man, it's just going to be really hard for us to find two separate caregivers. The recipient has to have one for 30 days. The donor has to have a caregiver for a week. And I've had even spousal donations happen where maybe they were compatible, but they just said for caregiver reasons alone that they've elected to go for the advanced donation option. Now, this voucher system isn't at all of the National Kidney Registry centers. So if you want to look and see which programs are offered by the centers that you're working with, there's the link there on the slide, kidneytransplantcenters.org. You can go on and see which programs are offered at the transplant centers that you're listed with. Okay, next slide. Now just talk a little bit about the influence of culture and religion in transplant. So, receiving a transplant or donating a kidney is a very, very personal decision. Your culture or your religion may play a very important role in your choice to do this. And while most major religions support kidney transplant, the decision is really ultimately up to you. If you're experiencing any concerns with your decision-making process, and we really encourage you to explore further with your local faith leaders. Of course, talk to your family members and even your transplant team. We can help you get some guidance on that. Okay. So now we've talked about some of the key strategies, busting myths, knowing the facts. We've talked a little bit about paired exchange. So now I want to present you with another question, I guess, and just to recap on all of the facts that we've covered, and I guess ask you to tell us which one of those that you found to be the most surprising. Okay, we'll share the results here with everybody and see what you think after we get some responses. All right, so for the fact about living donor kidneys typically lasting longer than kidneys from deceased donors, about 11% for that one. A donor can be older than the age of 60. About 27% of you found that to be the most surprising fact. A donor does not have to be the same blood type. About 50% of you found that to be the most surprising fact. And then 6% said I can receive a kidney from someone who isn't related to me. And 7% said if someone donates to me, they can have children afterwards. So that's great. Obviously, a lot of good information being shared here. But going back to that point about the blood type and the matchability that we talked about, really important that once we start getting you to get your story out there and people express interest, and we're going to talk about sharing your story here next. But anybody that expresses any interest, please encourage them to submit an application and just let us take a look at it and determine from there. So like I said, now we're going to talk about creating your story. And, obviously, in order to find a living donor, you first have to tell people that you need a kidney. You might be wondering and asking yourself, how do I do this? How will that help me find a living donor? And the first step is really to figure out what it is that you want to say. And we call that your kidney story. So in order to create that story, that's going to be our next key strategy. And we can go to the next slide. The National Kidney Foundation has created a worksheet to help you write your story called Sharing My Story. You can find this in your Find a Living Donor handout booklet. And then they've also provided several examples in there. You can kind of use these as inspiration as you write your own story. But really just start with writing some thoughts and some ideas down. There really are no quote unquote right answers for this. No one's going to see your list but you. So really just be honest with what you're sharing with folks, and try and make it personal to you. You can always make changes and decide what to share and or what not to share later on. Really, try not to think about it too much. Just write whatever comes to mind. Speak from the heart and be honest and make it personal. Today or sometime in the next few days, just try and take a few minutes and start with that worksheet and filling that out. A few reminders: if you are a kidney patient, obviously be writing about yourself. If you are a family member or a friend of the patient, then try and write the story about the patient specifically, but also write about how their kidney disease has an effect on you. Okay, next slide. Now we get to introduce some of our guest speakers, some folks that I had the amazing privilege of being able to work with to be able to help them find their kidney donor and receive his kidney transplant. So on the left here on the slide, we've got Rill, who was able to receive his kidney transplant from a donor that he found, and that is Nicole, who was on the picture on the right there. But But first, I want to take a chance to just let Real talk here a little bit and answer some questions for me. So firstly, Real, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. My life was not so hot before.
That's okay.
For Nicole. When Nicole came into my life,
That's okay. You can see this
I
means a
didn't
lot to you.
expect this. So anyway, it was really going through dialysis and all the things leading up to kidney failure was, not the best situation. But the minute that I got a phone call from Nicole, I remember the night, and she was pretty far through the process of getting tested, apparently, that I did not know. And we talked for about an hour, and I could tell that it was a miracle for me.
That's okay. Do you mind maybe just also maybe telling us a little bit about your journey through diagnosed? Were you on dialysis at the time that
I had a long-term non-hereditary bad luck IgA nephropathy kidney disease, and it I was diagnosed with it, many years ago, really, when I through a blood test, there's, signs of problems and blood in my urine, and I got a biopsy and they determined I had IgA nephropathy. But it was slow moving, and I lived for no, I'm still living. I lived a life of normalcy, really. I didn't realize that anything could be different. I worked and lived a
So
life of it well, and it was in my 50s. I just say this for fact, not like it. When I was 50, I won a national tennis tournament. When I was 55, I won several national tennis tournaments. When I was 60, I was doing in dialysis. So it happened quick, and I think it surprised my doctors and me, obviously, and I kept expecting that something was going to change and I wasn't going to have to go through this, but it didn't. And that was kind of before I met Nicole. But go ahead, please ask me a question.
yeah, that's okay. So were you on dialysis at the time that you got listed for a transplant?
I registered with Mayo and I went through the process, and I don't exactly remember the timing, but I know it took about anywhere from 3 to 4 months to 6 months to get approved by Mayo to be on the list. And I kept putting it off and putting it off before it was obviously that I needed to get on dialysis immediately.
Okay, so it was a kind of a few months long process for you to go through your evaluation and ultimately be listed. So talk us through a little bit about what went into for you deciding when you wanted to get the word out there, to tell people about your disease and that you needed a transplant and to ask some folks for help. What went into your mind for the things that you decided that you wanted to share and how you wanted to go about sharing your story?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a 3-part process. First of all, I have an incredible niece. Her name is Teal, and you've met her, you've talked to her,
Mm-hmm.
and she's just a person that gets things done. And
Mm-hmm.
she was really wanted to help me through this process and get my story out. But at first, I didn't want to do it. I was stuck in something. And then the second thing that happened is that I work with a firm. I've worked there for 32 years, and I had to tell my manager what was going on. And he would come in and he would look at me and I couldn't tell him. And then he'd come back. He goes, you do have to tell me. Yeah, I think he was thinking all kinds of things besides that my kidneys were failing. So the minute I told him, he said, I have two friends that just had kidney transplants. You got to call these people. And they were two people in our business that live in the New York area. And they were a lot different than me. And they basically told me that you have to get on this right away and you have to let people know about your situation. You have to let people know your story. And so when I got off the phone with these two people, I called my niece and I asked her to start the process of writing she was going to do a Facebook story of me, and we put something together. She put it together, really. She put it all together. And then a lot of people started to hear about it. And I let people know from my childhood, from college. Well, really, Teal let people know from my work, from this area, everyone that she could think of, she let people know. And somehow Nicole and I have something in common. We love dogs, and
It's okay. So I just want to take a moment to kind of illustrate to everybody here what Real shared with us on how he just started. He got some help from a family friend or from a family member of his to kind of help start writing this story. It wasn't something he was able to do really on his own. He talked a little bit about the emotional struggles that he went through in starting this journey. But once they finally made the decision to do so, they started with Facebook and social media outlets and spreading the word there. And wow, just how incredible of an example this is on how far that can go. I think Real, if he wants to continue, I think he was just about to tell us about how through
the
Facebook and
last
a
thing is
common
that,
interest.
yeah, a mutual friend, my dog agility instructor, reposted what Teal sent out, and I think she might have said a few notes about me, I think. And apparently Nicole saw it, and the rest is history. And Nicole can tell you from.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that, Real. It's been truly, really special to be a part of it and watch it all happen and manifest. And now just being able to share it with folks here, again, to kind of talk about the importance of sharing your story and ways you can do that, and just to see how far that can go. I think we're going to talk a little bit more, go through some more of the slides, and then in a few minutes here, Dr. Mal is going to have an opportunity to ask Nicole some questions specifically for her so that the crowd can kind of hear from the donor's perspective. Okay, so next slide just talks about, what key points or important information did you hear shared in the story. I kind of reiterated and summarized on that a little bit, but really to personalize your story and some things that made this story specifically compelling and interesting. Real was somebody who he talked about how he was living a pretty normal, healthy life and had this hereditary condition that ultimately led to his kidney failure and him having to go on dialysis and be listed for a transplant. And then he was reluctant and kind of had a hard time accepting that, but his family members and different folks that he talked through stressed the importance of starting to get get the word out and spreading his story and just letting people know that he needed some help. And he did that. He got some help from his niece, and I know that she did a great job on helping him come up with a great story that could be shared. Just take your time whenever you're making your story about yourself, again, to personalize it and include some personal details and talk from different vantage points from you and other members of your family and loved ones on how your condition may affect them, and just see where that goes. You never know. A dog agility instructor may share it with the right community and it lands on the right person's Instagram or Facebook feed or Twitter, whatever the case may be, and it just catches their attention and they may feel called to do something special. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Mal.
Thank you very much, Turin, and thank you to our special guests. Now we're going to talk a bit about sharing your story and how you might do that to the community. So again, really broadcasting and spreading the word. Real Story shows us that one person, that one circle, you just need one person to share the story and find that missing link or that key. And I really encourage you to start with the people that you know, the people that are in your community, and then work your way broader and work your way out from that circle. And if it's too hard to tell your story, just like Real has shared with us, find a family member, a friend, a champion. Maybe it's someone younger in your community that really gets TikTok and knows how to do that. Or perhaps it's somebody within the church that can help you share it on a church bulletin, or somebody within your friend group that has a wonderful following on Instagram. The more people you start with, the more people you can work your way out and share that story with. And if people don't know, they're not able to help you. It's very hard, and we all want to remain private or not tell others that we're not feeling well or that we're sick or that we need help. But if people don't know, we're not able to reach out and help. And just like Nicole was moved to help Real, if she hadn't heard his story, she wouldn't have been able to help. This photo shows us the many circles of influence that you have and the ways in which you can reach out to get your story out there. And this will be available in your participant booklet. But what I really want to emphasize is that you're here at the core and at the middle. Your inner circle are those people that you see and interact with on a daily basis, your close family, your friends. And really, your most success in finding a donor typically falls from that sort of inner and outer circle. The people that you may connect with through clubs, through the Y, through coworkers, friends of friends, someone that maybe you went to school with or share your neighborhood with. There are people that utilize things like mass media, print media, radio, billboards successfully. But I would say the vast majority of people that find donors reach into that inner and outer circle, and some go beyond that level to help find a possible living donor. And now we'll talk a little bit about Nicole's experiences as coming forward. So I'm going to bring Nicole out, and I first just want to tell you, Nicole, how did you first interact with that post that really drew you to Real Story? What was your thoughts, and what were you doing when that came across your feed?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So yeah, it was kind of random. It was between Christmas and New Year. I was on Christmas break, and I always take the week between Christmas and New Year's off because the first 3 months of the year for me are a slog at work. And I just happened to see it. So I called the number and, went over and got some blood work done. I don't know what happened to that blood work. It's still in cyberspace somewhere, but I ended up following up like 20 days later and, getting referred to the right place. And so I went back and, no big deal, gave the blood, and all right, we'll see what happens. And that was pretty much, how I got started. I mean, I read the post, and I had recovered from, I'm very active myself, and I can attest to a lot of the things that were said about being active after donation. And I'm sure we'll get to that more. But I had come off a knee injury that kept me from doing some of the stuff that I had wanted to do. And I was, pretty annoyed. This sucked, and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And I could see that Rill was very active, and just coming off that and seeing how active, knowing how I felt from something as minor as a knee injury to not being able to do the things that he wanted to do, was really kind of what spoke to me, as far as moving forward.
Absolutely. And you said you had some blood work. Tell us about how that process went to first getting evaluated and being brought into the center.
So sure, it was a process. I did the blood work, and then I think after that, first, I mean, it was just a little vial of blood, the first one around. And I think from there in turn, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think after that, I got a call from Turin, and we talked and moved forward. And then I think the next thing I had to do, if I recall correctly, was a 24-hour urine test and a 24-hour blood test, or I'm sorry, a 24-hour blood pressure test, which was no big deal. I did in the privacy of my own home. I did have to wear a blood pressure cuff around for 24 hours, but it was no big deal. And then from there, I think I was determined to be healthy enough to make the big trip to Florida to be tested. It is the best physical I've ever had in my life. And we were off and running. And I just want to touch on something that Rill said earlier about where I was in the process. And that was a conscious choice on my part. Turin and I talked a lot about that, because that was something to me that I chose. That was nothing that, I had the freedom to let Rill know that I was being tested. I chose not to because I thought how I would feel in this process. And if we weren't a match, I would be super disappointed. And I didn't want to cause that. I only wanted to share good news, not bad news. So he had no idea that I was doing anything. And it was actually our mutual friend, Teal, had reached out to Karen, Rill's niece, and said, did anything ever come from that Facebook post? And Karen immediately called me and said, hey. And I said, okay, well, I'm far enough into it now where I feel okay saying, yes, this is where I'm at.
Excellent. So when did you then actually talk to Rill, and how did you follow that process? Did you go through Teal, or how did you reach out to him?
Teal, and then directly to Rill. So once I started contact Rill directly, it was from there, and it was pretty quick because that all part of it is kind of a blur at this point. But I think I talked to Rill pretty close to when I was actually going down to be tested. So there wasn't a lot of time, in between to kind of like lead up, build up, or whatever. That point, all of my testing had been scheduled. And so I was like, well, here we go.
That's fantastic. And when did you tell your family members that you were looking into or considering donating to Rill?
So that's a little, it probably would be a little bit different circumstances. My mom unfortunately took a really bad fall and ended up in rehab. So I chose to wait a little bit later to tell them, just because they had their own situation going on. I wanted to be able to say, this is what's going to happen. This is when it's going to happen. This is where it's going to happen, and have all of the things. And to be honest, my dad and my parents were a little surprised, and they were a little bit apprehensive, largely in part because, they were worried about me. But I was never worried about me. I knew that I was healthy. The one thing that I will say, once I decided to be tested, I was pretty focused on my health to begin with, but once I decided to be tested, I really just nailed down, diet, exercise. I personally chose not to drink. That was not something that I had to do. And to this day, that's a lifestyle adjustment I've made, not because I have to, but because I chose to. And so, once I did that, I really just kind of nailed it down. And so I knew that I was in good shape and that I was going to recover. So it made it a lot easier.
And then when did the two of you meet in person for the first time? And how was
day-
that experience? I'll ask that to
Actually-
both of you.
Yeah. So actually, my partner, I guess my former partner, is an agility judge. He actually met Real before I did. And
Okay.
it worked out perfectly. I mean, if everybody needs to, believe in a higher power, long before any of this started, when you have these agility shows, they're planned years in advance. And it just so happened that Memorial Day weekend of last year, my partner was scheduled to judge down there. So he drove down there, I flew down there, and Real met him. I think they knew of each other, but had never met him. And then we met the day before and had dinner the night before.
Wonderful. And Real, how was that experience for you, meeting your potential donor angel for the first time?
Amazing. And it was it was a great experience to have dinner. Are you talking about right before
The night before.
the night before the surgery, right?
Yeah.
That was and Nicole came over to where we were staying, and we visited a little bit that day, and then we had dinner, and I mean, obviously from everything you can just imagine how amazing it was.
What an incredible story. And then can you tell us a little bit about sort of the immediate post-donation recovery process for you, Nicole, and how things have been really since you donated?
Yeah. So for me, that day was easy. I mean, I showed up and I took a nap, everybody else was, fussing and worrying and whatnot. I took a nap and, I had pretty good pain control. The only time I really panicked in the hospital was when my night nurse said he was going to give me a shot in the stomach. And I said, "Excuse me, you're going to do what?" But it was just a very small needle, but I was very well controlled pain wise. I had one IV, 0 bruising. My anesthesiologist was fantastic. I told him, "You have 3 jobs: keep me asleep, keep me alive, and I don't want to throw up." He nailed it. And I was good. I slept comfortably all night and got up the next day, and my requirements to go home were to go to the bathroom, drink some broth, and I was out by 2 o'clock. By 2 o'clock, I was going to see Real, and then I was going home to rest. So it was really not too bad for me. I'd say the worst part was the bloating by far. I've had abdominal surgery before, so I knew what I was getting into. I would say my roughest days probably were like, I would say maybe Tuesday, like surgery was on Tuesday, and probably like Thursday or the following Tuesday till Friday, just, you just don't feel good, right? Because you're bloated, and every time you move, it's like you drank too much water. And then they tell you got to get up and you got to move around because you don't want blood clots. And it's really important to have a good caregiver, because my caregiver had me up and out of the house to just walk around, and then I would go back and rest. We were in an Airbnb 10 minutes from the hospital, so if there was any problems, we were nice and close. But once I got over, I've had sore abs. I know what that feels like. There was pretty intense bruising, but all that bruising was superficial. It was not like I had these big, awful looking bruises, but if you touched them, they didn't hurt. I think it was just from a clamp, maybe but honestly, I was shocked at how, I mean, yeah, you just had surgery, and, you've got the effects of anesthesia and whatever, but by the time I went home 2 weeks later, Turin had suggested I wait about 2 weeks, and I did 2 weeks to the day. I was fine. I mean, I wasn't going to run any marathons or set any records or anything like that, but I drove myself home and I did all the things that I needed to do, and off we went.
It's a fantastic story. And have you noticed any limitations? You're a very active person. What
I
are
am
you
very
doing
active.
today?
I am doing very well. There is, I mean, there is nothing physically, that I can't do that I did before. Still catching up. I do some pretty intense exercise. I do CrossFit. And there's some things that came back easier than others, but I would say probably at about 10 weeks, I got you're free to do whatever you want, but just be sensible about it. And I was. And I would say that, I think the biggest thing is just the residual of the cut of the abdominal muscles. Occasionally I would get a twinge, and I would say at about 9 months, all of the twinges were gone. There's nothing that I can't do physically, nothing that I want to do that I can't do.
What a phenomenal story. Thank you both for sharing and for telling us about your experiences. We'll move on to a few more of the
Yeah.
slides, but we'll
Just one more thing,
Yeah,
if I can.
absolutely.
For all you people out there that are considering, it is and continues to be by far the best thing I have ever done. To be able to, Rill and I are still in regular contact, to be able to hear all of the things that he can do normally, that we as healthy people, not attached to dialysis, not attached to physical limitations because we just don't feel good. Those are the things that, are really just so rewarding and gratifying. And a few days of discomfort is absolutely nothing. So it's worth every whatever. And we were lucky. We found out we were a match pretty quick. And that morning that Turin called me, I want to say that it was the week after we got our results, and I saw the Mayo number come up, and I grabbed the phone and I was like, hello. And he's like, hey, the compatibility reports are back. And I was like, okay. I mean, I literally, the blood like drained from my face, and he's like, you guys are a match. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, can we do this tomorrow? Can we do this next week? Obviously not, but that was probably, it was just amazing. So I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And do you have anything else you want to share at this point, Rill, as well? I'll open up the floor for you too.
The life that I'm living now is, today I did an incredible workout, inspired by Nicole. I've been trying to do all these CrossFit things, but can't quite do them. And around 8 months, I had I did have a infection right away, but once I got over it, about 8 months, I've had a few people ask me about it that are potentially going through the same situation. I told them at 8 months, I forgot about all the trials and tribulations that I had gone through, and just started to think about playing tennis again, and just dreams of working, in fitness and vacations and just living a great life. So I'm feeling amazing, and it's every day is a treasure.
Thank you both very much for sharing your story. And now we'll bring back up the slides and talk a little bit more to summarize really what we've heard. There you see a beautiful picture of our panelists. And again, in telling the story, I think what we've heard from our panelists and from others is that there are so many ways that you can get your story out there. And the biggest thing is really don't be afraid to share it. Talk to your family and friends. Use written media, send an email or a letter. Social media options, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Host a virtual gathering. Zoom is a fantastic platform that so many people are comfortable with. People could ask questions and spread the word. You may want to reach out to various community groups and really try to make it personal. Include facts about donation and truly share your story with those around you. Other things, we've had donors that have written a short message about being a living donor on their car windows. We've had people who've made bumper stickers with the call this number. Post a photo of you doing things that you want to do to really personalize that story. In our case of Nicole and Rill, they shared a commonality of dog agility. Who knows where that common theme may lie? And if you share a little piece of yourself, that might motivate someone to really come out of the woodworks and be your donor. Video is another excellent way that you may share your story. So maybe you don't want to type your story, but you can share a short video on social media. Again, this is a point where young people are fantastic about producing TikTok videos and other things, you may want to rely on your children or your nieces, nephews, grandchildren to share that story. Again, things like posting on the bulletin board at church or a yard sign within the elevator and so on. Truly finding your circle. And as we share this story, did this story really help you think about your own circle of influences? What people might make up your circle or who can tell your story? I think it's also really important to think about what makes someone a good advocate. So, for those that are on the call that maybe are not looking for a kidney themselves, but are advocating for someone else, what are the ways in which you can help your potential recipient to find a living donor? What tools can you use and what strengths do you have that you could bring to help a potential recipient? Or who do you know that can help tell that story? And so we'll post a poll next. And really, what actions do you think you're going to try next? And this is a multiple choice. You can pick as many as you like. Talking to family, friends, or coworkers, sending emails, posting on social media, speaking to a group, sharing with your neighborhood, sharing at your barber shop, your salon, something else. Right. And it looks like everyone's had a chance to post. I think our most popular are social media, communicating with our family and friends, and potentially speaking to groups. But really, we have a lot of different opportunities out there. Keep your options open and think broadly. And so, truly, we've reached the point of sharing the word here. And we'll move on to our next strategy of creating an action plan. And so, in terms of creating an action plan, that's really where we encourage you to take the tools that you've learned, the stories that you've heard, and develop the next step in your plan. And inside your participant booklet, you have a checklist which includes what things you're going to commit to. This is something that you can do on your own after the webinar. However, you can certainly look through it and think about the next steps and how you're going to go forward. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Candace to talk about some resources that are available for potential living donors.
Hi, everyone. I'm Candace. I am the independent living donor advocate for the team, and I'm going to tell you about a couple of resources that could be available to your donor. So the first one is through the National Living Donor Assistance Center. So a living donor, the living donor financial assistance is based on the recipient's income. So it is based on your income. If someone is non-directed, then they would typically be approved, but it will be able to cover travel, lodging, meal costs for the donor and their caregiver. It could also support them with lost wages for the living donor. It also covers costs for dependent care of a child or an elderly adult. It does take a transplant team member to help them apply for that, and that's usually our living donor social worker. And of course, if you qualify, you can include these benefits in your story. Next slide, please. Okay, now the other program available is called Donor Shield, which is through the National Kidney Registry, otherwise known as NKR. And as you see from this slide, they have quite a few benefits for donors. And I'll tell you about a few of them. Next slide, please. So first of all, there's lost wages. So some donors may not have the paid leave to take off and donate. So this program can be helpful in providing them that lost wage support. And of course, the living donor social worker would be the one to help them process that. Then there's the donor expense reimbursement. So expenses related to the evaluation and donation, such as travel and costs covering child, dependent, adult, or pet care. They also offer kidney prioritization. So if your donor donates through the paired exchange program that Turin mentioned earlier, and in the very small chance they need a kidney in the future, they'll be given priority for a living donor kidney through the NKR. There's also the voucher program. So if you have a donor who has children or a family member that might need a kidney transplant in the future, but the donor is currently healthy and they're ready to donate in the near future, they will be able to donate to someone else in need now. And then when their family member is ready for that transplant later, they'll be able to use that voucher to receive their living donor kidney from another donor. There's also an option of remote donation through NKR. So if you and your intended donor live far away from each other and they'd rather stay closer to home for donating and recovery, they'll be able to get evaluated and donate at an NKR center near them. And then you will be able to receive your kidney near where you live at an NKR center. So both of you don't have to travel and you can kind of stay in the comfort of your own homes. There's also complication protection. So complications related to donor surgery are rare, but if there are any complications related to your kidney donation surgery, there is financial assistance to cover costs, including lost wages, travel, and also that dependent care reimbursement. These are two other programs that are available to donors through the American Transplant Foundation, as well as the American Living Organ Donor Network. And this is their contact information websites. And I'll pass it on to Natalie.
Thank you, Candace. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Ball, and I'm the operations manager at Mayo Clinic, Florida. So just going to quickly touch on some of the resources that we have available from a Mayo Clinic standpoint, but to emphasize what Dr. Tia has already said earlier in the presentation, that a donor can come forward at any time. You could be starting evaluation, you can be undergoing evaluation, you can be waitlisted, but a donor can come forward at any point in your journey. The first step would be having the donor themselves contacting our center first. All will be required to fill that donor intake form out, but we do have our telephone as well as our email address on here if you have any specific questions that we can help answer. And then, of course, we put some resources on here from our center specifically. So first, we have our Transplant Center externally facing website page. There's a lot of great information on here. I encourage you to spend time going through it. It also does include a link to our intake form at the top of the page. It does also include our donor toolkit, which is that second link listed on this slide. Really helpful tool. There's a lot of great videos. It talks you through the decision making of becoming a donor, what to expect once you become a donor, the risks, a lot of the things that you heard today throughout the presentation, financial information, and of course, support groups. We have a new externally facing platform called Mayo Clinic Connect, and there's a lot of great blogs and support groups on there. All you would do is click that link and search for transplant groups, and you can get connected with people who are in a similar journey as you are. And then, of course, we talked about the website to request an appointment for evaluation. And I will pass it off to Savannah to go over some resources from the National Kidney Foundation.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you to all of our amazing speakers. I'm going to wrap up the webinar with just some resources that we have to offer from the NKFF, and then we will, I think we have plenty of time to open it up to some questions for our panelists and our patients that have been on the call today. So the first thing that we have at the National Kidney Foundation is the NKF CARES program. So this is a program where if you have questions or just need help getting started with anything related to dialysis, transplant, you can give us a call at this number or email those questions. And we have both English and Spanish speaking staff that can help direct those questions and just be a great resource for you. This is during business hours up until 7 p.m. So Monday through Friday from 9 to 7. The NKF also offers a wonderful program called the Peers Program. If you want to talk to someone who has had a shared experience as you, including dialysis, transplant, looking for a living donor or becoming a living donor, the Peers Program can connect you with those individuals. There's wonderful volunteers that work with the National Kidney Foundation. So outside of, your healthcare professionals or people that you kind of may see at the dialysis center that you might just kind of want to go in a different direction and ask some other questions to really someone that's been through it. This Peers Program is amazing. We also offer a full-time patient advocate at the Florida office. So if you reach out to us directly, we can put you in touch with that advocate as well. Can really hopefully answer any questions related to anything from insurance to treatment to all sorts of things. So please don't hesitate to reach out to these different resources. There's also online communities. You can connect with other kidney patients, transplant recipients, living donors through these different outlets. You can also remain anonymous if you would like and get answers and support from other patients, caregivers, and living donors in an online forum monitored by the National Kidney Foundation. So that information is up there with links as well. And if you would like to be a kidney advocate, you could join thousands of other kidney patients, family members, and living donors and have the chance to make a difference by helping to improve or change what's important in the lives of kidney patients at a national level. You can help by writing a letter to your congressperson or join a group on the local level to expand kidney patient access to home dialysis. Recently, our Kidney Advocacy Committee helped to extend immunosuppressant medication coverage for the life of the kidney. So that actually went into effect a couple of years ago, where coverage is now for patients moving forward who will receive those immunosuppressant medications for the entire life of their kidney, which is a huge win for our transplant community. And in Florida, through our advocacy efforts, we were able to pass the Living Donor Protection Act, and that's a law that protects living donors from being denied life, disability, or long-term care insurance after donating. So it was a huge win to get that passed in Florida, and advocates are now going into DC and meeting with legislators to try to get this passed federally as well. To better serve patients and increase access to transplant education, NKF developed self-paced recorded online versions of our transplant programs, and these are available to patients at no cost anytime and are delivered by transplant recipients and living donors who also share their stories. So you can find this link in your Becoming a Living Donor booklet also. And all these links will be available on the slides that we send out after the presentation. So this is great educational resources, and if you just go onto the general kidney.org website, you'll be able to access so many different educational pages on diet and modalities and transplants. So I highly encourage everyone to go onto our national website if you're ever looking for, any topic from dialysis all the way through transplant and living donation. You can search right there on the homepage and be able to find exactly what you're looking for. So in Florida, we do have financial programs to support our dialysis and transplant patients. So we encourage you, if you're on dialysis or know someone, to apply for our direct patient aid program. These are up to $300 emergency grants that cover food cards, gas cards, transportation, treatment, utilities, rent, and other miscellaneous items. Your social worker does have to apply on your behalf. You can either be on dialysis or even a transplant patient to qualify. And that can be done on our website, which is nkfdirectaid.org. We also have a fund for those that may need some help with their copays for their immunosuppressant medications. So this covers up to $3,000 per grant for patients post-transplant that need help covering those immunosuppressant medication costs. And this can be applied for by the patient directly on our website, kidneyfl.org. And once approved, your prescription will go over to the pharmacy that we partner with, and it's a mail order pharmacy. So you would get those medications delivered directly to your door. And I know the transplant center normally have other assistance programs for those post-transplant patients as needed. So definitely reach out to us or Mayo if you're in need of anything that, maybe that one little step that you need to get for approval for transplant. We're definitely here to help you guys. And I know that Mayo has incredible resources as well. In addition, for all kidney patients, we have a monthly support group that meets on Thursdays via Zoom, and you can go onto our website. The link is right there as well, and sign up for this. You can join us from anywhere, and even if you're not in Florida today and on the call, you're more than welcome to join us on that monthly patient support group. It's run by a patient himself. He has had a transplant for about 15 years now. And we have guest speakers come in, different physicians, pharmacists, patients that kind of cover the healthcare landscape. And it's a wonderful place to meet other dialysis or transplant patients as well. And as I mentioned, another huge thank you to Mayo, because they are so involved not only with programs like this, but also are our #1 team at the Jacksonville Kidney Walk each year, big sponsors of that event, and then come out with a huge team and raise a ton of money every year. So thank you guys so much for being so involved with the community and supporting everything we do. And we just love partnering with you all. So that wraps up all of our educational portion of this webinar. We've gone through the 7 key strategies to finding a living donor, and we heard from an amazing patient donor pair. So I definitely would like to open it up to questions. Probably easiest to put that in the chat, and then if you have like a specific question for one of our healthcare providers or patients, just let us know. So we'll give it a second to see if anyone has specific questions that our wonderful panelists can answer.
One thing, if I may, just jump in quickly. I was reading back through the chat and some of the questions that were posted, and so many of the questions specifically are about who can apply, who would qualify, when can they apply, is there an age criteria, is there a BMI, blood type, do I need to be listed, any of that. And for the recipients, which is, I think, the majority of our audience here, the team that works directly with them, unfortunately, may not have a lot of information about these specifics because there are mandatory and regulatory guidelines that force us to have completely separate teams that work with donor and recipient. So what I always say when I'm talking to recipients, when they're posing these questions directly to me, is tell anyone and everyone who is interested, tell the entire world, people at the grocery store, your church, your any network you have, any people that you have the opportunity to share with about having any interest in applying. Don't think that just because you may know that you've already got 1 or 2 people who may be in the process, let us get the applications, review it, and if it's a backup, or maybe they don't qualify, or maybe they do, that's information that the donor team specifically has and can work through those applications. And if you do have somebody coming through, you don't have any guarantees that that one's going to pan out. We can always label applications as a backup. We file it, and then we'll let that person know we're going to circle back to your application if anybody currently being evaluated doesn't work out. So the more applications you have for you, then the better the chances are of you truly being able to find your living donor, your Nicole.
Thank you, Turin. I'll go through a couple of these questions. I'll try to get to as many as possible. One is actually about pig kidneys. I think this is kind of a hot topic lately. Is there also a mechanical kidney? Will these be options in the near future? What are your thoughts on that type of technology?
So we are, as a transplant community, going forward each and every day trying to find alternatives for transplant. And that can include things such as a pig kidney, such as a 3D printed kidney, or some other form of implantable kidney, or even a partial kidney that could be implanted to do certain functions. At this point, each of these technologies are experimental. As I'm sure you've heard in the media, there are a number of individuals that have undergone a xenotransplant. Thus far, it's not yet ready for the prime time or the mainstream, but there are many, many exciting research developments going forward. And I think as the community continues to learn and grow and develop, we're going to have more options at our disposal, certainly within many of the individuals on this call's lifetime. But are they ready for today or tomorrow? For most people, unfortunately, not just yet.
Thank you, Dr. Mal. Another question is if this person is registered at one center, can the transplant coordinator at that specific center act on their behalf in order to get them on a list at another center in Florida?
Or you might be fielding questions, but no, we don't typically have our coordinators supporting getting another patient listed at another center. We can provide medical record information or imaging results, anything in their medical record to that center to be able to review those results and not have to repeat any testing, but it's really up to the center and their staff to support the patient at their facility.
That's correct. There are remote donation options through the National Kidney Registry where somebody can go to a center close to them and be fully evaluated at that center. And then if they're approved to donate and they send us the compatibility testing and we confirm that it is compatible with our recipient for remote donation, then, or if it's compatible for direct donation, we can arrange for it to be done remotely so the donor can be close to home with their support system and their caregivers and all that.
There's a question in the chat asking about donors needing to be on immunosuppression. I'll answer that a bit more broadly. So first and foremost, no, donors do not need to be on immunosuppression. And in fact, donors don't have any specific long-term medication requirements after donation. Most donors do take pain medications for a short period after donating, as well as medications for constipation. Sometimes that can happen after surgery, but they have no long-term medication requirements. And I'd also open it to Nicole if she wants to share anything about her post-donation medications or experiences there.
There we go. They're trying to come off mute. I'm sorry. No, I have no long-term medications, and I would say probably at 3 weeks I was done with Tylenol. I mean, because I started out with Tylenol and added a little bit of something after that, and then just slowly weaned down after the first week. I usually, I'd say probably for till about week 3 or week 4, I was taking Tylenol mainly at night, because once you get past like a certain whatever, you just you don't need it. So I have no long-term other medications as well. I take I don't even take anything. Yeah, I don't take anything.
Another question asks if someone had kidney stones, can they still donate?
So that is a very good question that we get all the time. It really depends on first the number of kidney stones. Like let's say a donor has had one kidney stone maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it passed, he did not require any intervention, then that would not be a contraindication for donation. But if someone has had multiple kidney stones and they have caused issues and he has required procedures for these kidney stones, then this person may be at risk after donation, and then they would not be a candidate. So it really depends on the number of kidney stones, when the kidney stones were, and what treatments were required.
And then for anyone looking to direct potential donors, Turin has put that link back in the chat. And as a reminder, the donor does have to contact the transplant center. Is high blood pressure a contraindication?
So also for high blood pressure, it's not like one size fits all. If a donor has high blood pressure, but it is well controlled on one medication or even two medications, then they may still be a candidate for donation. But if they are requiring 3 medications or more, and they are already at maximum dosages of these medications, then we most likely will tell them we will discourage donation.
Someone asked, can a living donor be HIV positive?
Currently approved HIV, individuals living with well-controlled HIV can donate to individual recipients living with well-controlled HIV. So if someone is living with well-controlled HIV themselves as a recipient, absolutely a donor could be considered either living or deceased with HIV.
And yes, a copy of the slides and the recording will be sent out to everyone that registered today. And that participant packet was emailed out prior to the presentation, but we will also reattach it along with the information that Mayo has as attachments to the email as well. So you guys have those all at the top of your inbox, and that will come from my email, which is salonza@kidney. I'll type it in the chat. If you don't see it for any reason, just check your junk email. Had about 400 people to send emails to, so hopefully you guys will get that. If not, reach out to me. I'll put that email in the chat again as well. Another interesting question is, can a donor have renal denervation?
I think we need to get some more information about what they mean by renal denervation. Was it like renal denervation done as a treatment for hypertension? Because that's not a very common procedures, and this is kind of a unique situation. So we would need to get more information about that.
They said for hypertension.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on whether they're on medications now for high blood pressure or not. So that is really a case by case, and we would have to review it in more detail.
And what I would encourage you also, a lot of excellent questions coming through about specific conditions. As we kind of spoke about earlier, the first step is to go online and put your medical information into our website. And so you can put that information in. And the first step is actually a call with Turin, Stephanie, and our other coordinators. So that call is really just an opportunity to get more information and to have your case reviewed. So please do not hesitate to have anyone come forward. Truly, when people ask me who can't donate a kidney, well, if you only have one kidney, you can't be a kidney donor. Or if you're on dialysis yourself, you also can't be a kidney donor. But beyond that, I would encourage you to have anyone truly reach out and get more information from our coordinators and help us to decide whether donation is safe for a potential donor.
Yeah, and then I think one last one that just came through. Is there a website to register to become a living donor across the country? Or I believe that would be the National Kidney Registry, and you got that, Turin. So thank you. Any other questions? Any questions for our recipient or living donor? Well, thank you all, and thank you to our amazing panelists. And again, Mayo and their wonderful team are available to work with any potential donors and answer questions you guys have, especially about the qualifications for those donors. Lots of those questions coming through. I don't know if Mayo or anyone from the team had anything else to say tonight. Otherwise, we will likely wrap this meeting up. And thank you again for joining us and for sponsoring this amazing program.
Savannah, I would just add thank you for the wonderful partnership with NKF, and we're happy to put on this webinar annually. And like we said before, if you have any questions for us, you'll have our contact information. And thank you all for attending, and thank you to our amazing guest speakers, Nicole and Rill. It was incredible to hear your stories, and it's an incredible journey that you've been on. So thank you for joining and inspiring hopefully many on the call.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.